I am financially free by owning rental properties that I bought without using any of my own money. I actually own $40 million worth of real estate that I bought without using any of my own money. I walked the path from side hustle to full-time real estate investor to financially free. However, I want to take a step back and go back to when this was a side hustle for me, when it was just me and my business partner, Lucas, when my wife was annoyed that I was out all the time working on properties, when I didn't know if I was going to make it or not. And this specific property I want to talk about in this video was that inflection point. It was the crossroads. I was either going to go one way and probably stop investing in real estate and just focus on my W-2 job, or I was going to go the other way and go all in and try to make this side hustle a full-time gig and eventually financial freedom. So let's go back and we're gonna talk about my fourth rental property, which is the seventh property in this series. I'm going back and talking about my first 10 real estate investing deals. I've talked about some flips, my first apartment complex, and now this is my fourth rental property. On the surface, this rental property seemed pretty innocent. Nothing amazingly crazy happened. There wasn't a fire. I didn't lose 20 grand, but there were some things that happened and some situations that I got myself in that made me question if I should move forward and continue to invest in real estate or keep my job that was paying me a lot of money. Let's go back in time and let's talk about where I was at this time. This was back in 2016. As I said, I had a full-time job. I had done a couple flips, one good, one bad. I had a small apartment complex that I was just starting to take over and a couple rentals, as well as a full-time job. And then I had a, I guess, 3-month-old daughter at the time that I got this property under contract. So I had a lot going on. I wasn't even 100% convinced that real estate was that financial freedom path for me. I was still questioning things. There was a voice in the back of my head that was saying, is this all worth it? Because I put a lot of work into it and haven't seen a ton of results yet. I believed in real estate as a long-term plan, but I was like, do I really need that? Can it actually provide a ton of freedom for me sooner rather than later? Or should I just stick with my job and then maybe make some good investments and hopefully retire a little bit early? Well, flash forward to today, I'm financially free and I was able to create more income than I was making an entire year in just a month or two with what I have done and what I've set in place. So, spoiler alert, things really worked out amazingly, but looking back, you wouldn't know it at the time in my life. All right, so now let's get into the property details. I want to talk about the numbers, going to show you some pictures of the exact property that I owned, talk about some good things, some bad things that went along, and then some lessons learned as well, and wrap it all up with hopefully some really good lessons and some takeaways that you can actually go take away if you're wanting to walk my path of side hustle, successful side hustle, to successful full-time, to financially free. If you want to walk that path, this video should help you get there hopefully a little bit faster. I got the property from a local wholesaling company. It's one of those we buy houses companies, one of those big investment companies that sends out mailers and has buyers and is a big company that has TV commercials and all that. I made contact with them at a local meetup and one of their buyers I connected with and he brought me this deal. Funny story about that is now I own that company. That company's Faster House. It's the top home buying company here in St. Louis. We buy houses as is, and now I own the company along with my buddy Lucas. But back then I was just starting to buy houses from that company, and this was my very first property. So it's kind of a lesson that you can deal with like wholesalers that do 1 or 2 houses a year, or you can find and connect with wholesalers and companies that do 200 a year. There are a lot of different people out there to connect with to bring you discounted properties. So I got brought this property and it was a decent deal. We did a little bit of negotiation, nothing crazy. It didn't need a ton of work. It was in decent shape. Ended up buying it for $82,000 and I ended up using a hard money lender for the initial purchase of this property. It was a local hard money lending company. I got approved through them a few weeks earlier and this was my first deal with them. So I was gonna use a hard money loan for the purchase and then I was gonna use some cash that we had made from our previous 2 flips as the rehab funds. I'll get into how it all broke down here in a little bit, but that's how we financed the initial purchase and rehab, hard money and our money. I just mentioned the fact that I had done a couple flips and had some money in our business checking account, and the contractor I used on my second flip, which went much better than my first. If you didn't know that or haven't seen that video, check that out up here. There's several videos in this series, as I mentioned earlier, and 2 of them were about a good flip and a bad flip. So the good flip and the bad flip kind of funded enough that I could come up with the $25,000 needed for this rehab. Now, I used that same contractor that did that second flip with me because I hired the second flip out. The first flip, not to go down that tunnel too much, the first flip, we did everything ourselves. The second flip we hired out, and the second flip went much better. However, that was a mistake because the contractor I used for this rental property rehab was a rehabber that did flips, not rentals. So he viewed rental properties as something that you just need to put a little bit of lipstick on that pig and move along. I since then, and after this property, I like to have nice rental property. I want to have rental property that someone wants to live in, not has to live in. So as you can see by some of these pictures, the kitchen we didn't really do anything to. The cabinets were 40 years old. They were in decent shape, but they didn't look nice. We didn't really replace much. This contractor that I had hired to do the project and to hire out all the subs, he was looking at this as just a rental property. Let's get it on the market. It doesn't need to be nice. It's not a flip. Who cares if renters don't have nice properties? He didn't say that, but I could tell that from his execution of the project. I mean, we failed inspection 2 times on this. I was there meeting the inspector, trying to button up things and do things, and they're like, you missed that and this and that. And these are stuff that the contractor overlooked because he didn't know that these were the type of inspections that were gonna happen on a rental property. I think he kind of thought that only if an owner-occupant moves in, it gets inspected. He maybe didn't know, so that's partially on me for not communicating, but it ended up working out, but it wasn't the best process. Now, speaking of me being at the rental property and trying to button things up, even though I hired it out because we failed inspection 2 separate times, I was there a lot, especially over a couple weekend period. And I remember I had, a few month old, and my wife was saying, why are you doing this? You make really good money in your current job. You already have some rentals. Our bank account hasn't really grown like our personal one, and our personal net worth hasn't really climbed a ton because, I had 20% equity in my rentals, and I was splitting out with my business partner, Lucas. It wasn't really anything substantial enough for her to think, yes, this is a great use of your time and energy being away from the family. And she was 100% right. So in order to get her on board, I ended up doing some PowerPoint presentations for her. I had done quite a bit in college, and I had to do some for my work. So I made some PowerPoint presentations. I remember specifically pulling out my computer, connecting the HDMI cord to the TV, and talking about what we had done and what we were planning to do and what the goal was. And we kind of got on the same page a little bit. So that got her on board a little bit more. However, it stuck in my mind that she's right. We haven't really made a ton of money yet. I've done a lot of work and a lot of effort. Shoot, at this point, we had done a couple flips. This is our 4th rental, and we owned a 9-unit apartment complex, and the numbers weren't quite adding up yet as far as all the time and energy spent. However, I kept my eye on the prize, and in my mind, I was thinking, after reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Think and Grow Rich and all these mindset books about growing wealth, it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme, but it's a get-rich-for-sure plan, and that is 1,000% true. So there was a time, I remember having a conversation with my business partner, Lucas, and I was questioning whether I or we should go forward with all this, especially because I was, getting in some arguments at home and missing time with my new daughter. So that wasn't ideal. Back to the property. So we bought the property, like I mentioned earlier, for $82,000 with a hard money lender. We used $25,000 of our own money in the deal. So we had $107,000 in the deal. Now, a hard money lender does require monthly payment. We had to take more money out of that business checking account to pay the hard money lender a little bit of money every single month. So things were adding up. You can see the stress piling up at home, the money coming out of the account that was starting to dwindle, not passing inspection the first couple times, the property not really even looking that nice. So there was a lot going on. So luckily, we got the property appraised, and the market was starting to kind of come out of that 08 hole, and the property appraised for plenty. It actually appraised for a little over $140,000. So if you know about the BRRRR Method, which if you don't, check out this video up here, you buy a distressed property, somebody else's money, you fix it up, you get it rented, then you get a local bank involved and do an 80% cash out refinance, meaning they will appraise the property and give you a new loan in the form of a check for 80% of the appraised value. Of course, you have to pay that loan back as a mortgage over 25 years, but that's a small payment. So that's what happened. $140,000 times 80%. So they gave me a loan for 80% of that, which was $112,000, which was enough to pay my $107,000 back, make us whole and then of course made the hard money lender whole plus interest. We didn't really make a ton on interest in that. The numbers were tight, but fortunately I had made enough between what I owed the hard money lender and what I owed myself and what I got to make it all work. Most of that went to the hard money lender. A little bit went to us, but not really. It was pretty much all to the hard money lender, so we basically financed ourselves for free. All right, now let's talk about some lessons learned, and I think this is the most important part of the video. By the way, if you feel like you've gotten any value so far or think I'm kind of an idiot for all the stuff I was doing, hit that like button. Either way, like it, don't like it, I'd appreciate a like. All right, so let's take a step back. I want to look at kind of the bigger picture here, and then let's kind of micro it down a little bit and talk about some specific lessons learned that I think you can take into your next or first investment. Number one is persistence can beat resistance. I was persistent in my conversations with my wife. I was persistent in keeping the big picture in mind. I was persistent in meeting the contractors there to try to finish the thing up, and meeting the inspectors there. I was persistent, and that got through any resistance that I was currently having at the time. If you continue to push forward and you don't give up, you will eventually be successful. This is why if people failed, I'd say this is 95% of the reason, is they simply give up. Not they didn't know or were stupid, they just give up. Social media is a perfect example. I have almost 2 million followers on social media, but for 8 months I was just spinning my own wheels, and that's what so many people do. They start social media or start anything, and they spin their wheels and don't see enough immediate results or immediate gratification. They see some resistance and they give up. Little did they know they might have been one video or one day or a few videos away from really hitting it big. So I was persistent, and that's been a theme in most, if not all, of my success. That shows in social media, and it showed in this, because after this, things really started to gain traction. I got my wife on board, so she was much more supportive. She understood what we were doing. I was continuing to give her those PowerPoint presentations, continuing to communicate with her and show her what was going on. So everything just kind of started to fall into place after this, even though my mindset wasn't quite there yet. I knew it was a good idea, but I wasn't seeing the results, but I just trusted myself. I trusted real estate. I trusted the videos I read. I trusted people like me that I was in your spot watching people talk about how it is so powerful, and seeing real life examples like I'm showing you to prove that if you stick with it, it will be all right. So there's the bigger picture, and then smaller picture, we kind of talked about a little bit already, but rental properties, I think, and I encourage you all to treat them as flips, or just treat them as nice properties. I don't do the bare minimum. I make them nice. I don't overdo them, but I want them to be nice. Granite countertops, backsplash. A little bit of extra money can go a long way. Your tenant will stay longer. You can get more rent. It'll probably be appraised for more. Everything can work itself out if you make the property a little bit nicer rather than err on the side of skimping. Also, I use my own cash, or we use the business cash on this deal, which I didn't hate because it kept us from all the hoops of construction dispersing, or maybe trying to get a private lender involved in the second position. It was a little bit scary because basically we used $30,000 of our business's money that we made in the flips, 25 on the rehab and 5 to the hard money lender over the few months, I think 4 months that we did this project. So that was a little bit scary. I think we had 40 something thousand dollars in the account. So it went from this big kind of buffer to not much left. And if it didn't appraise out, some or all of that money would have been gone. But fortunately, it did work out. So using your own money, if you have it, is not something that I would recommend if you have other options, but it's not a bad option if you have a ton of cash personally, or in a business account, or a line of credit. It's kind of nice to have your own money. You don't have to let somebody know what you're doing with it. You just use it. So make sure to account for it in your bookkeeping software, but it's kind of a nice thing to have the option to do. Overall, this was a great deal. I ended up no money out of pocket, cash flowing about $275 a month after everything was said. And now this property that was worth 140 grand is worth over 200 grand, and I owed 107 on it, and I think I owe about 85 on it. So there's a lot of equity in this property. It's produced a ton of cash flow over the past 6 years, and it's just an example of the power of real estate over time. And you can do this on any type of property, whether it be an apartment, single family rental, or storage facility. So if you got any value out of this video, I would really appreciate a subscribe, hit the notification bell, and check out this series over here where I walk through the other 10 properties that were my very first investment deals, getting a new perspective along with an experienced investor perspective. See you on the next one.